Get your win at WallaceWins.com.
We are back, episode 12 of the WallaceWins.com podcast. I know you missed us. We have a special guest in studio today. Please welcome my esteemed colleague, Danny Abir. Danny, welcome.
Thank you, Brad. How are you?
We are more than pleased to have you in studio. And I know that the commute was rough for you to get here this morning.
Yeah, it took a long time for me to get here.
Yeah. For those of you who want to understand the inside joke I just made there, Danny's office is across the street from mine here in Encino. So he had to fight the crosswalk sign to get here. But thank you for making the time. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
For those of you out there that don't know, Danny is the managing partner of Axe Law, Abir, Cohen, Trazon, and Savo, one of the largest plaintiff-only litigation practices in California. After co-founding the firm in 2016, Danny has played a pivotal role in its remarkable growth. Under his leadership, Axe Law has expanded to comprise of a firm of over 100 dedicated lawyers and staff and achieved an impressive record of over $1 billion in recovery for his clients. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about a lot of the success that your firm has had over the last few years and get into that. But first, in the tradition of the WallaceWins.com podcast, we're going to start off with an icebreaker known as Rapid Fire. All right. Are you ready?
I'm not sure, but let's go.
I'm going to throw out a list of things, and rapidly, I want you to answer them without even thinking. It's kind of like a psychological evaluation or speed dating, right? But whatever comes to mind, and there's no wrong answers. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coolest place you've ever been?
Dubai.
Best sport to watch?
Football.
Movie you've seen more than any other?
Shawshank Redemption.
Good one. Favorite time of day?
After 5 o'clock.
First band you saw live?
Oh, shit. Aha.
All right. Best city you've ever lived in?
New York.
Best compliment you've ever received?
Compliments about our firm.
Biggest pet peeve?
Being late.
Most famous person you've ever met?
Robin Williams. Joe Biden.
He's pretty famous. Favorite sports team?
Any sport? It'll be Dodgers.
What are you listening to right now?
A book called Eruption.
Window or aisle seat?
I'll see.
And ladies and gentlemen, that has been Rapid Fire. Well done. There's a little bit to unpack there.
That was a lot.
I mean, I feel like I know you well, but I feel like I know you better just knowing some of your answers. I didn't know that you lived in New York. That's interesting.
I went to NYU got my master's in taxation from NYU. So I lived there for 3 years. And I would say if you're married with kids, not necessarily, but if you're single or even married but just no kids, Manhattan is one of the best cities in the world to live in.
Yeah, it's amazing out there. Shawshank Redemption, a total classic.
My second favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, what's the first?
Godfather.
Okay. But you've seen Shawshank more.
Yes.
I've seen that movie a lot too. Just a personal favorite of mine as well.
Every time you see it on TV when it comes on, you can't help but watch.
I know.
It's one of those movies that you're like, you don't flip through it even though you've seen it.
Yeah.
You just it just grabs you.
Absolutely. So very cool. Yeah. Pet peeve, being late. I'm on board with you. That's just total aggravation. What was the coolest place you've ever been? What'd you say?
I'd say Dubai.
Dubai.
Yeah.
How recently were you in Dubai?
I've gone every year for the past 3-4 years, once a year.
I've been hearing amazing things.
It's phenomenal.
So what's the big draw? Just walk me through it.
Very clean, incredibly safe, high tech. They treat you well. Food is incredible.
Just like a first class experience.
Very first class experience. It's funny because one of the questions I asked the first time I went, I asked someone who was a server at a restaurant, and I said, "You guys are incredible. What do they teach you?" He says, "When you come to Dubai and you want to get a job, they put them through hospitality training, everybody.
Wow.
So it's something that you don't see as many locals as you see tourists. That I would say is probably one of the coolest overall experiences.
It's like ingrained in the culture and the experience.
Yeah,
Like
they are aiming to please, and they're aiming to make it a good experience. I know a lot of people who go there and then they say, I want to move here.
Wow.
So it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
I'm actually headed there in a month.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's on my bucket list. All right, so that's great. I mean, we're just happy to have you in studio. I want you to talk a little bit about your firm and your role at the firm. You're the managing partner, but there's 4 named partners and you have other, really high level attorneys. Your firm has a lot of different practice areas. So kind of walk me through, sort of how you got here and what your role is at the firm and what you do day to day.
So my role at the firm is one of the things that I truly believe in is that everybody has a superpower. I believe that everybody has intrinsic abilities that they're really good at. And I also believe that if you focus each person to just focus on their strength or what their superpower is versus doing anything else, they are a lot more efficient, a lot better at what they do. So they'll do a lot more.
And they enjoy it more.
They enjoy it more, 100%. Usually what you're best at is what you enjoy the most. So repetition doesn't bother you. And also it creates muscle memory. So you just keep on doing the same thing, but you become better and better and better at it. So the firm is built over the past 10 years. We went from one person, which was Alex, and one employee who he had, to now over 100. We have about 30. We now have 35 lawyers in different departments. And the idea was to put people to do what they enjoy doing the most.
Right.
And just that. So Boris loves being in trial. He is, I call it him being on vacation because he doesn't respond to emails. He doesn't respond to phone calls. He just focuses on his trial. And he is loving it. I mean, if it was up to him, he'd be in trial every single day of the year.
Right. And you're talking about, just for our viewers, Boris Trezon.
Boris Trezon.
Who's a named partner and just recently, within the last few years, won CALA Trial Attorney of the Year for a big verdict and has had unbelievable success in the courtroom.
He is by far one of the smartest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah.
The things that he comes out of his head is just mind-blowing. And he enjoys it. He's quick on his feet. And one of the reasons he's so good at trial is the fact that when he's in trial, he can come up with things that the average person does not come up with, the average trial lawyer doesn't come up with. And but he loves it. So every time he tries a case, he becomes better and better and better at it. And defense lawyers as well as insurance companies are learning to see, look, you don't mess with him. So
Right.
He's actually getting more settlement offers now than having trial, much to his dismay, much to my happiness. I mean, I'm happy with the fact that he doesn't have to be in trial, but he wants to be in trial. So going back to what I was saying is Boris loves handling trials. Alex, for example, has been handling property damage first-party cases for decades now. And that's all he does. He manages that department. We have a department with 5 attorneys, about 10 total staff. All they do is property damage first-party cases. And that's all he does. Renata is the litigation the partner in charge of litigation. Her and one other attorney, one of the senior attorneys, basically work together, whereby they meet with every associate every single week and make sure the cases are moving forward and answer questions to the associates. Overall strategy and everything like that. She is incredible with details. Mm-hmm. So that's what she focuses on, and that's what she enjoys doing. She doesn't enjoy being Boris. Boris doesn't enjoy being her, and neither one of them want my job.
Right.
I don't know if I should be happy or not happy, but they come into my office when I'm doing my job. They're like, "Thank God you do what you do, please." I don't.
Well, and that's the nature of a successful partnership where everybody has their lane, right?
Everybody has their lane, and they're happy with their lane,
right? Because
the worst thing is to have a lane and not being happy with it, and then you're miserable,
right?
So I do think that, and I'm not just saying this because I do it. Everybody else would admit it. Managing the firm is the hardest part of the job. Because as a trial lawyer, you go to trial and you get a victory or you have this huge settlement and everybody's going rah, rah, rah,
Right.
look at what you did. As a managing partner, you get all the, I want a raise. This person is not performing. We need more people. We need this. We need that.
Right.
It's constant wanting.
Or in other words, it's maybe the least connected to being a lawyer. It's more connected to being a businessman and a manager and kind of
Very much so.
herding cats, so to speak.
100%. 100%. And then the more people you have, the more personalities you have to deal with,
Right.
which creates, again, but there's a certain type of personality that can do this. And I think that's my superpower. One of the things that I think I do very well, I interview every single person we hire, every single one, from receptionist all the way to partner. And it takes me 3 minutes, 2 minutes, sometimes instantaneous. I know whether this person is the right person for the job or not. Because by the time they come to me, they've already gone through people checking out whether they're technically capable.
Right.
I look for personality, and I look for people who are witty, where this works. And as long as this works and you give them what this wants, the heart can basically push you to, and you have the ability to learn, you'll learn more and more doing what you love to do.
Right. Let me ask you a question. What do you think it is about your personality that gives you the superpower to be that sort of managing attorney role? What is it about your specific kind of way that you approach things that you think gives you that superpower?
I'm kind of unique in the sense that people tend to be either implementers or visionaries. I'm unique in the sense that I'm a visionary in the sense of knowing where I wanted the firm to go and the vision I had for the firm. And I can implement my own vision. But at the same time, if you and I sit down in a room and you start telling me, saying, Danny, I have this idea and I want to do this, this, and this, and it doesn't have to be with law. The way my brain works is I immediately not only visualize what you're saying, but I also see, I don't just see the forest, I see the trees, I see the road, I see the path, I see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're telling me all this, and then I can go and implement your vision the way you're describing it with the details.
Right.
So I think that's what's allowed me to do that. Boris walks into my office sometimes and he has very limited time. He goes, boom, 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 boom. I have this idea. What do you think about this, 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 this? Halfway through, I've already seen where he's going. And before he's out the door, I can start working on implementing what he wants to do.
Right. Now, another question that kind of flows from this as you're explaining some of this is, in your experience, what do you see are some of the blind spots that people have where they're a visionary, but they can't implement, or they're an implementer, but they can't have the big vision? Like, what, in your experience, what are some of those roadblocks, and why do you think people have some of those roadblocks?
I think it goes back to the whole superpower thing, because some people are left brain, some people are right brain, some people can, you tell them what you need done. And as long as you tell them what you need done, they kind of cross the T's and dot the I's, and they just make sure everything falls
Down
through.
the checklist, right?
They don't have visions. They just know how to follow protocol. Like Renata, one of the things she's, God bless her, she's so good at what she does is it's almost like OCD. She has a checklist that makes sure everything is actually done. She actually takes notes in writing still. And she has pads, and you tell her about a case, she remembers the details of the cases, right? So each person has, there are certain things that you have in you intrinsically that allow you to be very good at what it is.
Right.
So I think those who are visionaries and can't be implementers tend to have ADHD, tend to be able to like focus for a very short period of time. They get these sparks of genius, right? And it's so funny that if you talk to a lot of really, really smart people, most of them have ADHD. The brain goes there. It has the spark of this idea, and within seconds they go to the next idea. But then they need somebody, because they can't focus on that. They need somebody who is so focused on that idea and sees it and able to finish it.
It's interesting you say that, because I think there's always a positive way to look at things in life and a negative way. And a lot of people look at ADHD or people that have short attention spans or however you want to say that, or people that get frustrated easily as being a weakness or a negative or a drawback. But looking on the flip side, some of those folks are the ones who are able to come up with those brilliant ideas. But the frustration sometimes comes from, I have all these ideas, but I can't close the loop on everything. So that's kind of goes to what you're talking about.
That's why it's the yin and the yang. That's why it's so important. Having the right partners, having the right combination, people you can not just trust, but complement you. I am a big believer in teamwork. I'm a big believer in that, like collaboration.
Right.
I do 100% think 2 brains are better than 1. 10 brains are better than 9. I mean, it's just the more people, because everybody brings their experience and their thought process into the equation.
Right.
So what you bring along with those experiences are your abilities. So someone who has these brilliant thoughts, I think Elon Musk, if I'm not mistaken, has ADHD. Some of these like really, really smart people who've been very successful,
right,
they come up with these sparks of ideas. And what makes them even smarter is that they surround themselves with people who can take those ideas and go implement it.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, Steve Jobs had a second in command who actually was the operator.
Yeah.
And he was the one.
I think it was Tim Cook, right?
Yes. Didn't remember his name.
Yeah.
But see, he had Tim Cook.
Right.
Jobs was the brain behind the idea the vision, and he actually implemented the vision. And I think that combination really goes very, very far, and it does well.
Interesting. And in your experience, I know we're sort of going on this topic for a while, but I just find it to be so interesting because it goes into a lot of the psychology behind sort of how you approach building your practice and how you approach segmenting different parts of your business and putting people in positions of success. But in your experience, what would be your best advice to people who may be watching who would say either, yeah, he's right, I'm a ADHD visionary type. How do I find someone who's an implementer? Or versus I'm an implementer, how do I find a visionary? Like, what's your advice to people to find the right people to team up with to accentuate their strengths?
I think first you have the number one thing is knowing what your strength is, because that's the number one spot. It's like, okay, I've had people who I've sat there and talked, and I try to help young attorneys who are trying to build their practices. And they say, what do you think my superpower is? I'm like, no. Let's first see what you think your superpower is.
Right.
Because sometimes people think they have certain strengths and they don't really have it. It's just the desire. I was talking to somebody actually a week ago at an event that we were together for LATLC. And he was telling me, I'm so good at rainmaking. I can bring cases like crazy. But I've always wanted to be a trial lawyer. But I've never handled trials. I've never done litigation. And I'm like, do you like being a trial? Would you like to be a? He says, I don't know. There's this thing in me that wants to, because I see other trial lawyers do it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be good at it. So I'm like, okay, so why don't you try? Why don't you focus on? But you have to focus on it if you're going to do that. But if you already know you have a strength, which is for him rainmaking, that rainmaking ability is a huge, huge positive for him to be able to just cultivate and make it stronger. In your
experience, do most people inherently know what their superpower is? Or are there people out there that think they have a certain superpower but may actually just not be self-evaluating correctly?
That's a very good question. I think there are folks who do. I think for the most part, people either don't know what their superpower is because they've never focused on it, nor do they know to look for it. One of the interesting things, and you have kids, so you'll probably relate to this. I want to see how you deal with it. So we have our kids who may struggle with a particular topic. Let's say they struggle with math, but on the other hand, artistically brilliant.
Right.
I mean, you see some of my daughter's art in my office and you'd be like, holy cow, who did this? And I would say my then 7-year-old,
wow,
right? But what do we do as parents? What do we do when our kids are struggling in an area and strong in the other one? We go and get a tutor for the weakness.
Right.
Emphasize the
the
weakness.
difficulties.
Right. Let's try to make that stronger. Versus, you know what? Let's get her an art teacher. Let's put her in an art program, because this is obviously a strength in her that you can cultivate and make it better, because that's what the superpower is, right? So I think part of it is us as parents, when we are raising our kids, we are not really focused. And I think I don't know if it's cultural or if that's just how we are, how we're wired, but as parents, but I think we don't focus on the strength as much as we should.
Interesting.
I think we focus on the weakness and trying to make the weakness stronger.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right.
I think that kind of goes into the psychology behind how many people really know what their strengths are, because throughout their lives from childhood, parents basically focus on, let me make you stronger in this area. Let me make you a better athlete. Now, meanwhile, the person may not be athletic at all, but they're being pushed to become a better athlete, while their real strength is math, or their real strength is whatever.
Right.
Writing, or just creativity.
And even within like adults, like you're talking about the conversation you had with a younger attorney last week, we talk about it even in like the trial practice space as trial attorneys. You can't present a case to a jury and have them believe you or have credibility on behalf of your client unless you know who you are as a person yourself. You have to know yourself. Otherwise, everything that you present to the jury is going to come off as manufactured or not authentic. And I think in a lot of ways, for somebody to recognize and evaluate what their own superpower is probably comes down a lot to them being honest with themselves about who they really are and what really moves the needle and motivates them and what they're really good at. Because to your point, a lot of attorneys out there will say, hey, yeah, I can bring in cases all day long and I got clients signing up and I have this revenue funnel and that, and I can refer cases. And to you or I who run a law practice, like, well, that sounds really good. But because I see all these attorneys on Instagram, I think I want to be a trial lawyer. But they're sort of chasing a little bit rather than looking inward and going, who am I really? What am I really good at? And how can I really maximize that? So can you speak to that? I mean, do you see that?
No, what you're saying is absolutely true. That's exactly what's going on, is because you're looking on the outside. Going back to parents, look at how we are a parent. Parents like, okay, my son or daughter are going to be either accountants, lawyers, or doctors, right? God forbid they want to do something else. Now, the flip side of it is going back to being honest with yourself. Is someone, and I've seen this in children, where the child wants to follow music, for example, right? The artistic ability, the ability to somehow make money at this or make a living at it, no matter how much you try, is not there. But the love is there. So then you look at the flip side of it and saying, okay, I'm going to give him all the runway in the world for that child to become an artist, to become a musician. But if you know that that's not going to happen, they're not being honest with themselves. It just becomes an escape. And then you're basically feeding something that there's no positive coming out of it at the end of it. So it's kind of a catch-22 in a way, but you really have to look deeper. I think the number one thing is, one, as children, we have to help our kids grow to know what their superpowers are and what their strengths are. But as adults, being honest with ourselves, looking at, I got to tell you, when I see Boris go and get a verdict, sometimes when he comes back, I'm like, oh my God, I wish it was me.
Yeah.
Of course. Look at how we went to, I don't know about you, but I'm older. So one of the things that grabbed me about law was LA Law back in the late 80s, early 90s, the show on TV.
Yep.
And I still remember the music playing in my head, and I remember the building and everything, right? So you looked at that and you're like, I want to be that person. I want to be that person that's in court or does this and does that. that's kind of what he's describing when he's saying, I see all these trial lawyers and the results that they're getting, and I want to be that. Great. Is it really you? Is it really part of you? Is this something is there a fire in you to want to do this? Because I've handled trials. I can't sleep the night before.
Right.
You have butterflies in your stomach when you're in trial. And it's the funny thing is I talk to trial lawyers. Most of them say they still have the butterflies. I mean, after like 20 trials, they still wake up. They still can't sleep the night before. They still wake up early in the morning.
That's how you know you're alive.
Exactly.
It's kind of like they talk about NFL or NBA players that retire after a 15, 20-year career. And they have a hard time walking away from the game, not necessarily because they want to keep working out and stay in shape and all in certainly the locker room and the relationships. But a lot of it is you can't replicate the feeling of running through the tunnel on Sunday morning and having 60,000 fans chanting your name and wearing your jersey. And, that it's such a unique experience.
There's an adrenaline rush.
There's a huge adrenaline rush, and it's hard to replicate. And a lot of athletes have a difficult time, and I'm sure a lot of trial lawyers have a difficult time retiring or stepping away or scaling back or whatever the case may be, because even if you do it for 20 years, every time you walk in front of the jury, you're feeling those butterflies. And
100%.
But that's part of why we love it, right?
Right. It is that adrenaline rush. It's so funny because last night my wife and I were watching the Celine Dion documentary. It's riveting, and it's really interesting watching it because you see this artist who was at the very, very, very top of the game and where she is now. And the thing that she says she misses is, I miss being in front of the crowd. I miss the fans. I miss being out there.
Right.
And then they show clips of her in these auditoriums with thousands and thousands of people chanting her name and singing her songs. And
I mean, she might have had the longest running residency in Vegas ever.
Right. And the most successful one.
Yeah.
So that when you look at that, it kind of goes in every profession, like sports, like music. When you're at the top of your game, and if it's something you love doing, it's just great.
Right.
So, but the thing is, people look at that from the outside and they're like, I want that. But you have to find that in the context of who you are and what it is for you. And I think that's where I don't think it's something you can teach. I think it's just something you have to look for.
Yeah. And people have to be honest with themselves. They have to go through a lot of introspection. You have to strip away a lot of the BS of, sort of what pushes and pulls people around it from day to day. And that takes a lot of work too. I mean, it's not, if it was easy, everybody would do it. Right. So what's your advice for someone who's watching and going, yeah, this all sounds right, but how do I figure myself out? Like what are some of the things that you did early on to kind of figure out your superpower, and what advice would you give to folks as to how to go about being honest with themselves and figuring that out for themselves?
The way I found out for myself was just finding, it's so funny because the very first job I had out of law school once I was done with all the education was I got a job at Deloitte & Touche. And now it's called Deloitte, but it was Deloitte & Touche back then. It was a big 8 accounting firm, and I think now it's the big 3 or 4. So within 2 months, and I was a puny, like junior associate that just got the job. I brought in a client for the firm. Now, mind you, Deloitte is one of the biggest accounting firms in the world, and their clients are Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 10. I mean, like big corporations. So they're not used to the person who just started right out of law school bringing in business. And the partner in charge told me, he said, this is unique. He said, why did you even think of this? And I said, well, to me, this is my firm. Even though I'm not a partner, the success of the firm will be on me as well. So I think that way. And that's just the way I was. And I remember the review I got from the partner at the end of the year, at the end of my first year, saying this guy has his business mind is on a different scale that's where his focus, that's where he should be focused on.
And it's interesting you say that because in that scenario, you were just being yourself.
Yeah.
And you didn't even realize until somebody from the outside came in and said, this is unique, that it was unique because you were just being you. So perhaps part of it is, you know, being your authentic self, but then paying attention to when people point out to you like, oh, what you just did is not normal. And maybe realizing that some of the things that you by yourself take for granted because that's just who you are might actually be a little bit different. That actually might be a superpower.
100%.
Interesting.
And the amazing part of it is exactly that. To me, that wasn't anything unique. That was just me, being authentic, like
Right.
you're saying. So I didn't even think about, oh, okay. So then as I went along, I went more towards that aspect of being a lawyer, I guess, and less on the details, more on the macro and building. And the funny thing is I realized most lawyers are not very good at the business side of things.
Right. Especially trial lawyers.
Especially trial lawyers, because there's a certain level of ego, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but there's a certain level of ego you need to have as a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And to simplify it, or to give an example, it's kind of like a closer in baseball or a kicker in football, where you're going to go and kick a game-winning field goal or close out a baseball game, but you blow it. The next day, you have to go up again. And if you let it get to you, if you don't have at least a certain level of ego that you can say, every time I go out there, I'm going to crush it, you're going to crumble because there's no way you win everything.
It could break you.
Right.
And you've seen it, and there's been NFL kickers who've missed big kicks and they've never kicked again.
100%. And then you saw like someone like Adam Vinatieri who would miss like four of them, and then come the next game and boom, he'll just start hitting them again. So that is 100% something that you have to have as part of an ego. So when you're looking at a business from a business point of view, you can't look at it that way. You can't say, I'm going to crush everything. You have to be practical. You have to be realistic. You have to know when to cut it and say, we had a case, for example, where we had never met the client because of COVID. The client was out of the country, but when we met the client and it was close to trial, I'm like, there is no way this person should go to trial because we would get crushed. Then we did a focus group, and the focus group members, everybody's disliked the client, which reaffirmed the fact that we shouldn't go to trial on something like that. We had already spent something like $40,000 on that case. It was a decision that a trial lawyer would say, oh, I'm going to go crush it regardless, right? Not being realistic. But as someone who's being realistic, and you talk to the client and say, listen, this offer is better than what you're going to get in trial. You're going to spend a lot more money. And the likelihood, based on what we're seeing from a focus group, is that you're not going to get the win that you want.
Right.
So this is a better result for you. And the client agreed with it once they saw the focus group. But it takes a certain practical person to do something like that for a client, as opposed to somebody saying, I'm going to go knock it out of the park.
Right.
And then there's the other aspect of not just trial lawyer, but lawyers. Most lawyers going to law school, their pre-law school education is some type of liberal art, English, poli-sci, history, something like that, not business. So they go through that, you get an English degree, and then you go to law school. In law school, they don't teach you, they barely teach you how to be a lawyer, let alone how to practice, how to be a business person, or how to do the business side of it. And then they get out of law school. What are the two options? You go work for someone.
Or hang your own shingle.
Exactly. In neither of the two, you've gained any experience of running a business, which is the conclusion I came to years ago. So I'm like, okay, there's a need in this area, in our profession, for someone who can visually see that side.
Right. Which is a credit to you, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, your firm is one of the largest plaintiff contingency only, plaintiff firms in the state. You've built it up, 35 plus lawyers, 100 plus team members. And there's a reason why there's only a few firms out there that have that kind of size, because to your point, it's not the typical model in the sort of the business of trial work for plaintiffs that we do. So that's a credit to you. What's interesting about what you just said is that, and as I was listening to you, I really agree that it really is two different distinct skill sets required to be a great trial attorney and to manage a great law office.
It 100% is.
And, you either need to have sort of a unique skill set to be able to do both, or you need to have a partnership where one does one and one does the other. And I think that's probably why we don't see a lot of firms the size of your firm, because of those reasons.
And the ones that are on the larger side, if you look at it, most of them, there are exceptions, but most of them have someone with a business background at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody with a business mind at the helm, because they're looking at the business side of it so they can build it that way. The nature of our practices as contingency lawyers has a lot to do with it as well. We are not a widget business. We don't sell products.
Yeah, it's a very unique business model.
A very different. I mean, it's funny, to this day, after 15 years, my wife still says, how is it that like 1 month is this and the other month is this? Because you're like, you never know what's going to come. So unless you have some sort of a business acumen to be able to deal with peaks and valleys,
right?
You're not. It's hard to survive it. So
and certainly even harder to grow it.
Exactly that? That's exactly why it's harder to grow it, because of the fact that the bigger you get, the deeper the valleys, right? So you're going to
and the more capital investment,
correct,
to sustain it, right?
Correct. And that's one of the reasons it becomes very difficult to grow a contingency practice. And those who are actually opponents of plaintiff attorneys who this is the part of it, either they don't realize it or they purposefully don't say it. The amount of risk it takes for a contingency lawyer to take a case from A to Z, start to finish. People don't realize how much it takes to do that. You're not getting paid for your time. You're not getting paid for any of your staff or employees or any of it until and if it becomes, you get a result for it.
Right. And meanwhile, you're advancing money.
You're advancing all sorts of money. You're advancing case costs on expert costs, and they charge thousands of dollars an hour. We have a case right now. We have $1.3 million into the case.
Yeah. From
us, we're on the hook for that $1.3 million.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for us being willing to do that, 99% of our clients would not be able to get their day in court. They would not be able to get justice.
Correct. And it's funny. I had a case recently that was ramping up for trial and expert depositions and everything. And I just chuckled to myself at the beginning of a deposition because you have a defense attorney, multiple defense attorneys on the Zoom, a court reporter, a videographer, an expert. And I was chuckling to myself. I'm like, I'm the only one that's not getting paid for this deposition.
Isn't that funny?
The expert's getting paid for their time regardless of the outcome. The defense attorneys are billing hourly to the
court reporter.
The court reporter is getting paid. The videographer is getting paid. But to your point, that's the unique and significant amount of risk involved in the business. Obviously, there's the potential for a great result and to make a good living in the business as well, which is what drives, in part, a lot of attorneys to seek this area of practice. But it's not a cakewalk.
You know what's so funny? Whenever we're in Vegas, folks ask me, "Do you gamble?" I said, "Why aren't you gambling?" I'm like, "I gamble every single day. I'm in Vegas to have fun."
Right.
Because it is gambling. And if you go and bet on red or black, right, your odds are 50-50 or a little bit less than 50-50, right? But your return is equivalent or based on the risk that you're taking. If you bet on a number on a roulette table, the odds are a lot less that you're going to hit. But if you hit it, then you get a much bigger number, right? That's what it is. If you're risking $1 million on a case or $1.3 million on a case and 7 years of your time, then you're doing it in the expectation that if I hit that 9-figure result, yes, the client is going to get a lot of money, and yes, the attorney is going to...
The return is going to justify the risk.
It's the tantamount of putting that $1.2 million on the number 35.
Right.
Not red or black, number 35, because then you get multiples of it, but you're risking all of that like that.
Right. And there's so many unknown variables and factors that are so out of our control as the plaintiff attorney, you know. Is the judge going to continue the trial another year? Is COVID going to hit and the courts shut down for 18 months? Is the defendant going to become insolvent and file bankruptcy or use bankruptcy? What we're seeing now in a lot of these class actions, the Boy Scout sex abuse case and things, using bankruptcy as a litigation tactic to try to avoid collectability. And so there's so many roadblocks along the way that even if you have, you know, the client walks in the door and says, here's the case, and you evaluate it, and the liability is great and the damages are great, and you know, you have everything lined up. Even in that situation, there's no slam dunk here. There's so many things that could happen.
There is no such thing as slam dunk. Boris was in trial for 4 weeks up in Fresno. Boris, Doug, another partner in the firm, and Allison, a senior associate in the firm. So 3 attorneys in Fresno for 4 weeks. They tried the case. It was bifurcated, so there was liability and damages. After the liability phase, the judge declared a mistrial. They pulled the jury. The jury would have come back with, there was a $380 million juror, there were a couple of $55 million, and the rest of them were at $95 million for a sex abuse case. Point is, that if the judge would not have declared a mistrial, within a couple of weeks, they would have had, let's say, a $95 million verdict. The judge, you never expect that, a mistrial for absolutely no reason. The reason was not valid. But anyway, the point is you can't tell.
Yeah.
You go get these huge verdicts. There's bankruptcy, there's appeals, a whole bunch of things that could happen. A judgment could be set aside because a judge doesn't like certain things.
Yeah, I just had that happen. I got a $1.6 million verdict.
Congrats.
In Long Beach against the city of LA in August of last year. And the judge set it aside and we're up on appeal.
Yeah.
So that happens all the time.
And even if the judge had not set it aside,
they would have
good
appealed.
luck collecting. Yeah, and then good luck collecting from the city that is currently. You have even settlements that you settle today.
8 months, 12 months,
12 months before you get paid.
Yeah,
which is another thing that's not factored into this. That look at how long it takes, even if when you have certainty of a settlement, how long it takes for you to actually get paid. And during that period of time, you still have to pay your employees. You still have to pay for your rent. You still have to cover all of this until that comes in.
Right.
So it kind of, this is a two level conversation. One is about why it's so difficult to build a large plaintiff practice. And two, what it is to have a plaintiff practice to the outside world that thinks, okay, you know what, lawyers make a lot of money or lawyers do this and that. And it's like, you don't realize what it takes to actually make that happen.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we're going to put a pin in our conversation for now because we are going to move into our next segment, famously named Underrated, Overrated. You ready for this one?
Oh boy.
I'm going to give you a list of topics and you're going to give me your opinion as to whether the topic is underrated or overrated and a brief explanation why. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Underrated, overrated. SoCal weather.
Overrated. It's changing. I mean, everybody thinks that Southern California weather is incredible. Nowadays, you have 50, 60 degree temperatures all the way through first day of summer, and then you have scorching hot temperatures. So I think it's overrated.
FaceTime calls.
Overrated again. It takes too long. I'd rather have more efficient boom, 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 have conversation and move forward.
Ranch dressing.
Overrated. Not a big fan. I'm a big vinaigrette balsamic fan.
Seeing a movie in the theater.
Oh boy. Underrated. I'm a big movie fan. And it's funny, during COVID, I thought that the whole movie industry is going to change. So I built a room in our home that now is just my movie theater. And funny enough, we went and saw a movie with my kids and my wife for the first time in 3 years. And it was a very different experience. So I'd say it's underrated.
Yeah. It's like a lost art, but it's still fun to go.
Yeah.
Chat GPT.
Underrated. It's going to revolutionize the world, not just our industry, but in every industry.
Surprise birthday parties.
Underrated. It's very difficult for me to get surprised. Funny enough, my wife actually surprised me on my 55th, but it is underrated. It's just an incredible feeling.
The snooze button.
Never used it, so overrated.
Making and eating dinner at home.
Underrated. There's something about having a home cooked meal and having it with your family around you.
Agreed. Side hustles.
Overrated only because I think it's better to focus on one thing and just be very good at that as opposed to having multiple things you have to keep track of.
The filmography of Nicolas Cage.
Definitely underrated. Over the recent years, he's had a few that I'm like, what the hell are you thinking about? And I think it's more like out of desperation. I think Al Pacino lately has been doing a lot of that as well. But if you look at the filmography of his entire career, underrated.
Sleeping more than 7 hours.
What's that? It would be nice. I have no context with that because I don't think I ever get that much sleep.
And last but not least, the Beatles.
Okay, you can't say overrated because you can't say underrated because it's so hype. It's like the #1 rock band of all time. So you can only go down from being at the very top. So I would say overrated.
You know, I only asked you that question because I was looking for the viral moment where I could get Danny Abir to say that the Beatles were overrated. And I think we just accomplished that. That has been underrated, overrated. Well done.
Thank you.
All right. So I want to segue the conversation a little bit, if you don't mind, because I want to talk about another aspect of your professional life that connects to your managing of Axe Law, but is, kind of in addition to your day-to-day with the firm, which is your involvement with a number of consumer attorney organizations, not only locally here in LA or across the state of California, but nationally. So locally in LA, it's the Consumer Attorneys of LA, CALA. Across California, it's the Consumer Attorneys of California, CAOC. And then nationally, it's AAJ, the American Association of Justice. And you're very, very involved in all three organizations. And I want to talk about that a little bit. But to start out, what I want to ask you in general is why you feel it is so important in your role with Axe Law and as an attorney in the consumer space to be involved in all of these organizations.
So each one of these organizations impact consumers in a different way. Consumer Attorneys of Los Angeles is more focused in the city of Los Angeles, the courtrooms in the city of Los Angeles. So it's something that impacts, right now we have a huge shortage of judges. We have a huge shortage of courtrooms. And CALA is instrumental in trying to work with both the defense bar, as well as LA Superior Court's basically judges to be able to come up with solutions and how we can address that. So if you're fighting on behalf of consumers, the local part of it is really important. Consumer Attorneys of California, at the state level, it has to do more with laws that affect or impact Californians as opposed to just a specific city. So being able to reach the governor, being able to impact the legislature, to be able to make laws or help with laws that will assist consumers overall in the state of California,
Or prevent laws
that
that are
will
being
be
pushed
against
by
them.
the
Correct.
insurance industry.
Correct. Just to go back a couple of years, the State Bar of California was trying to push for corporations to be able to allow corporations to practice law in the state of California. If you look at that model in England and other countries that have allowed it, you will realize that it has absolutely no impact on access to justice, which is something that the State Bar was claiming. And the only thing that would do is you'd have corporations that have significant conflicts of interest with their clients being allowed to practice law. Through CAOC, we were able to get to the legislature and have the legislature put a stop to the State Bar going in that route, because it really was not something that was pro-consumer. So that's as far as the state is concerned. And then on a national level at AHA, we're looking at governments. Basically, we're talking about political influence on being able to influence laws that will impact consumers overall, such as tort reform, national tort reform, such as trying to help bring on board leaders who are pro-consumer as opposed to having the interests of insurance companies and large corporations in their, that being their priority for them.
And that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, each organization has their own, sphere of influence and sphere of
Focus.
What, beyond the obvious, I want to be involved to try to help and advocate. What for you do you feel is like the importance of being so involved? Because, for example, for CALA, Consumer Attorneys of LA, you're on the executive board. This year you're the treasurer. You're going to be the president of that organization in 2028. So you're not just like a card-carrying member, but you're actively, putting a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources towards this. So what about that is so important to you, and why do you feel it's so important to put so much time into it?
I think for me, it's part of giving back, because I'm not the litigator, I'm not the trial lawyer. The interactions with the judges are not as fruitful for me personally or for ACTS than other people who are on the executive board. So for me, it's really trying to pay back. Part of it was I thought that there are things that I'm talking about superpowers. There are strengths in me that I think can help with the organization. And funny enough, when I was actually running for the executive board, what I was talking about and my talking points were, I'm bringing a different type of acumen to the executive board than what's already there and what's been there for years, because I think our practices are going to change. I think that there's an eventuality in which corporations will be allowed, unfortunately, to practice law in California one way or another, because they're going to get there one way or another. For us to be prepared for it, to be able to prepare the younger generation and the newer lawyers as to these are the things you should be looking for. These are the things that you should be doing. I think the introduction of artificial intelligence is going to do a lot for our profession. I'm the first speaker at this year's convention. It just happened that way. And I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence and our practices and how there are different tools. What are the different tools you can use to try to make your practices more efficient? These are things that I think being on the forefront and being able to help the next generation of lawyers is really important. So that's the main reason I really got involved. Mm-hmm. My son wants to become a lawyer. So I want to at least be able to say
you haven't talked him out of it yet?
I've tried. He sees me every day. And he sees our colleagues and our friends. And
right.
He actually it's funny because we put him in a debate program at UCLA when he was in 10th grade, or maybe 9th grade actually. and he did very well. So it's something that is part of
got the
him.
bug, yeah.
He has the bug to
It's good.
do that. But if we're going to do that, if we want to keep our profession alive, we have to try to contribute. And funny enough, it's like you said, it's a volunteer organization. You're not getting paid for it. There's
Right.
nothing. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We're doing this because we not just love what we do, but we love our profession, and we're trying to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not as integrally involved in terms of executive committee and things like that, but I've been a member of Consumer Attorneys of LA since I started practicing almost 20 years ago. And I'm on the board of CAOC with you this year, member of AAJ as well. And I think that, there is some, you could say, for younger attorneys who are on the fence, should I join? Should I give my time? Is it worth it? Things like that. Beyond the altruistic part of it, which I think you probably only recognize after you've been involved and understand sort of what you're going to get out of it. There are also, I think, some professional benefits that young attorneys could look at and say, well, it's an opportunity to meet a lot of the other, really accomplished attorneys in the space, form connections, brainstorm cases, get advice. Nothing in our industry needs to have the wheel reinvented. Any struggle that any younger lawyer or any attorney who operates their own business is going through typically is a struggle that somebody else before you has gone through. And so these organizations, I think, also are really good to provide the platform to be able to meet more people who are similarly situated and have been through what you've been through. Can you speak to that?
It's actually the mentorship and the education and the interactions are incredible. I've rarely seen any of the accomplished attorneys on CALA not wanting to reach out and say, okay, how can I help you? Or some of them have received awards for being that exactly person. They get emails and how would you do this case, or how would you handle this situation?
Right.
We have a listserv where we actually ask each other for help, and we're very eager to help. One of the things I love about CALA specifically is that it's not really, it isn't about politics. It's 99% about education.
Right.
And educating the next generation, which is something that I think is really important.
Yeah, and the other aspect too, like when I talk to younger attorneys who ask me, like, should I get involved in CALA? I don't know if it's worth my time. I go back to, the cliche of like, if you want to get something done, you ask a busy person to do it, right? And you look at organizations like CALA, and the people in leadership are not attorneys that are sitting around with a bunch of extra time on their hands. Our president this year, Ibieri Sec, she has a very, very busy, robust trial practice. Last year's president, Min Nguyen,
was in trial. Min was in trial.
He's in trial right now.
He's in trial
in
today.
Long Beach.
Yes, he's in trial. I was talking to him yesterday. He was in trial yesterday.
Yeah.
I texted him. I said, if you're not in trial, LOL, please give me a call. And he was laughing back. He's saying, I am in trial. Just started trial.
Right. So, I tell younger attorneys all the time, like, if these folks can make the time with their busy practices, Gary Dordick shows up to events, and Arsh Hamanpour,
he's the one who got the award for
responds on the listserv.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned so much from Arsh's, sample work products and him responding to me personally. He's a mentor of mine. But when you see people who are at the top of the game, successful, super busy, and they're able to make time, I don't really think there's an excuse for anyone else to say they don't have the time to do it.
100%. Yeah, Boris was in Paris. Okay. He got a call from a CALA board member actually, about a situation that she was having, and she's like, can you please help me? Boris was on the phone for an hour and a half, sitting in Paris.
Yeah.
Responding.
I had a situation probably 3-4 years ago. Well, actually it was a little longer. Maybe 5-6 years ago, I was in trial in Ventura, and I was struggling to prepare an aspect of my closing argument. And I wanted to use a part of an argument that I had heard Nick Rowley give over at a trial skills conference. And just on a whim, because that's who I am, I emailed Nick and I reached out to him because I'm always of the mindset to ask people who know better than me to learn. And I'm not really shy about it. I'll email people or ask. And if they don't respond, it's all good. And if they do, great. Nick was on vacation in Costa Rica.
And he responded.
And got on the phone with me for over an hour the night before my closing argument. And so it speaks to that is who Nick is, that's who Boris is, that's who Arish is.
And that's who the organization is.
And that's who the organization is, yeah. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So for anyone out there on the fence about joining CALA, COC, AAJ, what do you say, Danny?
100% join.
Just do it.
It's good for your profession. It's good for your education and professional growth. And you make really, really good friends. It's funny. One of my closest friends actually makes jokes with me every now and then. He says, "Do you have friends that are not attorneys?" The reality of it is, if you enjoy those who you work with, and you enjoy hanging out with them outside of work, it's not work. Even the work part is not work anymore.
Right.
So my best friends are all lawyers, and they're all plaintiff lawyers.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you a couple closeout questions because we're getting towards the end. But I always like to give my guests the opportunity to give some sort of big picture answers to some big picture questions. So what is the best advice that you would give to attorneys out there looking to have more success in the practice of law?
Start out as the Lincoln lawyer. Do everything yourself at the very beginning. Everything from answering the phones, doing the intake, filing the complaint, everything yourself, guiding, managing the client. For two reasons. One, economically, that's the right thing to do if you want to build a business. Two, if you're going to grow, the best person at the top is someone who's done everything from A to Z. Because then you know how to manage people. Then you know what kind of a person you want to hire and should put in place. And that's how you become more successful. And in answer to the question of when is the first time when do you decide to hire somebody after that, find the lowest denominator work that you end up now doing and it's prohibiting you from doing other things because there's too much to do in a day. And that's when you hire. So in our example that I was giving, I said, answer your own phones. Okay. Now you have too much time. You don't have enough time to do everything else. Have somebody answer the phones and you do everything else. And then have somebody do the intake and you do everything else. And then have somebody manage the client's doctor appointments and then you do everything else, and so on and so forth.
Very good advice. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Buy Netflix.
Don't invest in Blockbuster.
You know, it's so funny. It's so funny. I had a dream about 5-6 years ago that I go back in time and I'm on the beach where I was as a 22-year-old, not 18. And I see myself and I start talking to myself and I say, buy Netflix, do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then I came to the realization that I said, oh boy, how am I going to find Lucy, my wife? What if I don't have my 3 children? I get chills every time I think about that dream. I woke up and I look up and they're still on the beach somewhere. And ever since then, not once have I said, do I want to go back and give any advice to myself younger? because that anything I would have done differently would have taken me on a different path where I wouldn't be sitting in front of you today. So that's the only thing I would say is everything happens for a reason. And that's the advice I would say, give my 18-year-old self. So never to fuss or be upset about anything that happens, because everything happens and then something else happens. So you never know why things happen.
That's very good advice and very profound. And thank you for sharing that. And I think that's as good a place as any to end our podcast today, Danny. I really want to, again, thank you for coming in. It's been a really an honor and a pleasure to have you. Even though, like I said from the outset, we have a good relationship, I learned a lot more about you today, which was great. And hopefully our viewers were able to extract some value from your words of wisdom as well. So thank you very much.
I hope so. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
And thank you all for tuning in. This has been the WallaceWins.com episode 12 with our dear friend Danny Abir from Axe Law. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Get your win at WallaceWins.com.